Welcome to The Real Market with Chris Rising, the only podcast that brings the real estate conference panel to your headphones. You'll hear from superstars from every realm of commercial real estate, the biggest brokers, the most well-known architects, the largest investors, and the most visionary developers. We'll learn what they do, how they do it, and what drives their success. We'll discuss the latest trends across regional markets, capital flows, both national and global, and we'll explore technology's role in shaping all of them. We'll take a clear-eyed look at where we've been, where we are now, and what's to come. Real conversations, real experts, real insights. This is The Real Market. Welcome to The Real Market with Chris Rising. Excited to have Jonathan Wasserstrum with me today. He's the CEO and co-founder of SquareFoot. And SquareFoot, for those who are in the know, is really taking on the big boys. They're going after brokerage in a way that is really exciting to see. And I think coming out of this pandemic, I think is going to have a lot of legs. So Jonathan, welcome to The Real Market.
Thanks for having me, Chris. I'll argue that we had legs going into the pandemic too, but get there.
All right. Well, I think it's going to be really interesting over the next year or two as we look back and say, what were ideas that were started before and people weren't as aware of, as opposed to what happened while it was during the pandemic. But I think the point is this is not a new thing that just came up during the pandemic. You've had a good decade under your belt of building this business, but why don't you tell our audience exactly what SquareFoot is and where you compete?
Yeah, and I'll give you that we are even better positioned now than after. But yeah, look, SquareFoot's a tech-enabled commercial real estate brokerage, right? We help companies solve their real estate needs. We do that by bringing transparent access to inventory with SquareFoot.com. You can think of it like a Zillow for office space. So kind of first step anybody has on their journey is I want to see inventory. But everybody also wants and needs help with that transaction. So we have a whole bunch of brokers in-house who do those deals. That's how we make our money on transactions. And then we build a bunch of tech and products for our clients, the tenants, for our in-house brokers, and we'll have a landlord product over time as well. And that tech makes the process a lot more enjoyable, easy, and efficient for all those parties concerned.
So there's a lot of people out there who know in technology about companies like LoopNet and CoStar. So there is somewhat of an assumption out there that the commercial real estate industry has some technology that's related to brokerage, but I think we all know that's trusting CoStar is a tough way to for your broker to make a living. So what makes SquareFoot unique compared to CoStar, LoopNet, and some of these other sites out there that if somebody does a web search, they might be able to find some office space?
Yeah, so like taking those two in order. So LoopNet is pretty good, probably if you were looking to buy like a small pad site, like small investment sales type work. It's really not good for leasing, even from like a discovery process. And then it's also not involved in the transaction. So it's fine. It's like Craigslist for office space or Craigslist for real estate, right? So you can see you can see some couches that are for sale on Craigslist. Doesn't try and show you all of the couches. It's just the people that happen to be selling couches at that moment. But if you've never bought a couch before and you don't know how to negotiate trying to buy a couch, you don't know the gotchas, probably not the best way to buy a couch. Not to mention it's not all the couches on the market. So that's LoopNet. And then CoStar, if you're a prospective tenant, you don't have access to CoStar, right? We in the industry, although not we at SquareFoot, but traditional brokers have access to CoStar. You as a prospective tenant do not have access to CoStar. And then in both of those, they're just listings platforms, doesn't actually help you with the transaction. And I'll maintain till I'm blue in the face that tenants want and need help with that transaction.
Mm-hmm. Where does VTS fit in all of that as compared to SquareFoot?
So historically, they were, like a better version of Excel for asset managers. Which is amazing, right? Like Excel is $1 trillion business and asset managers were using Excel, and there should be a real estate specific app for that. And that's what they did. Now they're starting to dip their toe Truva, which is now called Marketplace, which actually might just be called Market now. I don't think they're trying to be involved in the transaction, but they're trying to be an extension of a broker.
Yeah.
Right. So again, if you need help with the transaction, don't go to VTS. Mm-hmm. If you are a broker and you want to look at some portion of the inventory that's on the platform, you can use VTS, and it's going to have nice pictures and all that stuff. And I think you actually do transactions through the platform. So kind of baby steps in the right direction. Ultimately, I think they're trying to compete directly with CoStar. I don't think they're trying to build out a brokerage, but we'll see. That's Nick's problem.
My take is that they're not taking on brokerage. They don't want to. They want to be. They want to be helpful to the brokerage firms that support them.
Yeah.
But a lot of things I want to go into today. But one of the things, since I get asked this all the time, I have to imagine you do. What is the pandemic going to do to the demand for office space, and does that threaten your business?
So, two things. One, both are good things, net. Actually, we'll talk about the unalloyed good thing, and then maybe me just trying to like pee on my own leg and tell me it's raining. So the unalloyed good is that if the pandemic has shown us one thing across industries, it's that people are more inclined to use technology than they were yesterday, right? So whether it's healthcare, a lot of that's moved online, a lot of which does not move back offline, right? So yes, virtual visits might still be there, but even just like the kind of the pre-check-in stuff is all online now. And even when you start going back IRL to your doctor, that stuff's not going back in the genie. Grocery delivery, sorry, that genie's not going back in the bottle. Grocery delivery, same story, right? I used to love going to the grocery store. Now I'm habituated to ordering. And I really like going to the grocery store. So I'll probably go like once a month because I like it. But most of the time I'll be ordering and it's going to show up at my house. Those are two things that if we had this conversation 18 months ago would not have been things, right? And we were already seeing in commercial real estate that people were more and more inclined to go online, right? We've already seen it for the last 15 years with residential, right? The thing that's always funny when I talk to a commercial real estate broker and there's like, no, like nobody's ever going to use technology. And I say, how'd you buy your house, man? He said, I was on Zillow. I was like, so what's special about us? And the answer is nothing, right? And so that's like the unalloyed good, right? People are online looking, and that train has left the station and picking up steam. Now, more directly, your question about demand, demand will look different, right? I'm not smart enough to know if that's a drop of 5% or 30%. I don't think it'll be 30%. It surely will be 5%. By the way, I don't own any buildings, so it doesn't really impact me. It does impact me because we do make money leasing transactions. And if rents drop, then the percentage obviously drops. I think some companies are going to go fully remote. I think that's a really, really small percentage. And then the companies that are going to go, and look, everybody makes up words depending on the day, but the companies that have some remote, some in office, you say, great, Chris, how many days a week can you be in the office? And you say, I don't know, like 2 or 3. And I say, which 2 or 3? Nobody's picking Monday and Friday, right? Which means you have everybody who says they want to be in the office 2 or 3 days a week or in the office the same 2 or 3 days a week, which means you need the same amount of office space. Now, maybe it's configured differently because the people who are going to, quote, work from home on Monday and Friday are going to do their deep work on Mondays and Fridays, and then we'll save Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for in-person interactions. So you'll have more collaborative space, and maybe not everybody has a private desk. So I don't think you're going to see this like drastic drop in demand there. By the way, when there is a drop in demand, assuming the same amount of supply, I know enough economics to know that that should make prices drop. And when prices drop, people consume more of something. Yeah. So in New York, where the average rents going into COVID were like $75 a foot, you're like value engineering every square inch of that space to see how many desks you can squeeze in there. If, and I don't think this is going to be the case, we're not seeing it be the case, but if tomorrow we woke up and it was $50, well, everybody's just going to get more office space, right? If you look at the average amount of space a company uses in New York versus, let's say, Houston, where you have $35 a foot average space, people have about 1.5, 2 times as much office space per person. So you'll just see that.
Well, let me ask you this, because you hit on the Monday, Friday thing. I mean, I don't really feel like the pandemic has now decided that we're all going to work only 3 days a week. I mean, I think there's going to be a lot more pressure put on the time that you spend at home working if you're an employee. But where do you see, just from the clients that you have, people coming down around, fear of missing out? How does someone get that promotion? Young people, this is their social life. When I was young, before I got married in my 30s, my social life was my business life.
I mean, I agree, but I'm biased. So I try and like unpack those two things, right? The example I'll use is myself, and you're not supposed to like extrapolate like your own personal experience, but my job in real estate before business school was at JLL. And I worked in this group called the International Capital Group. It was me and my boss in DC. My boss was like 40 years older than I am. And then analogous pairs throughout the world in major capital markets. So the rest of my team sat in Sydney and Dubai and Shanghai and London. I haven't talked to any of them except for my boss in the last one when I left JLL 10 years ago. I still text on a weekly basis with some of the guys that sat next to me and monthly with others, right? So, and I didn't work with them. They just happened to work at the same company at the same time, and we wound up hanging out together. So that, to your point, right, that in-person interaction is more important than anything else. And especially, kind of young 20s living in a city I'd never lived in before, that was one of my social outlets. Yeah. So the notion of all of a sudden, great, everybody's going to work from home. And it's a bridge I'm not comfortable crossing, especially in the markets that young people want to live in. So a New York, a DC, an LA, any of the top 10 markets where, by the way, real estate's expensive, both on the office side and on the residential side. So if somebody lives in a studio apartment in New York and you're like, okay, Sally, you should also work from home. Again, a bridge I'm not comfortable crossing.
Yeah. So when you're looking at the universe of potential business for you, I'm just guessing, but I got to imagine IBM doing a 1 million square foot lease isn't your direct market. But if you take it from that, where do you find most of your clients coming from as a firm and as you grow? Because you should talk a little bit about the growth you've been under, because you guys have been growing quickly. What's the perfect client for SquareFoot?
I'll answer that question. I have a provocative comment on the last thing, because you said, well, what about promotions and stuff? My provocative comment is that if you care about your career, you want to be in an office.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think Jamie Dimon said it best. Young people and hustlers are going to come back because that's how you get things done.
And there's a bunch of people who by the way, if you don't care about your career, I don't judge you, right? Yeah. Like not everybody wants a corner office. By the way, you can have my corner office. Like not all it's cracked up to be. I have plenty of friends who there's a difference between live to work and work to live. And neither of them is good, or neither of them is perfect. But if you don't really care about getting the best performance reviews, I don't believe you need to be in person in order to show face in order to get a good performance review. I believe you learn 100 times more and 100 times faster if you're in the same room with the person who's trying to teach you something.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%.
So
I think one of the things that's been kind of lost in the punditry over the last year is there's some jobs, you're right, they probably don't need to be in an office. There's probably some coding jobs. There's probably some, especially writers, reporters. I mean, the need for a newsroom doesn't seem like it exists anymore. So I get that there were probably users who shouldn't be in an office and they were just doing it because that was what people did. But I think there's so many other businesses where being mentored, having the conversation literally, hey, do you want to go grab a bite of lunch, really matters. And I just think when everything's shut down, nobody can really have a voice about that. And people who are professional writers and professional Twitter users can get their point of view out there all the time. I also maybe question the kind of the news intake I get on Twitter, because I tend to react more to people who say the office is dead because I just don't think it's true. Right. But having said all that, you've got a business to run that's all about getting clients who want to have an office space.
Yeah.
And you have a great website that allows someone to go on there. How do you look at your competition, and what do you think that you have around IP
Yeah.
that makes it unique, so that a CBRE can't one day just say, "Oh, we can compete immediately with you"?
Let me answer that. I'm always like one step behind. So let me answer the second question, which was about who uses us. And then I'm going to answer why we're better than CB and JLL and why they can't just copy us. So who uses us? It's not IBM for 500,000 square feet, although we are bringing on brokers who have that experience. So we'll start doing more of that work, though that's going to be sourced the traditional way, probably, and not online, though we're actively working a deal in actually LA, where we just opened up shop. That's a 100,000 square foot headquarters deal that found us by Googling, I don't know, Santa Monica office space. And we've done a bunch of deals for Fortune 500 companies for like their satellite offices. We've done like a deal for like Baker Hughes, right, which is a subsidiary of GE. GE, last I checked, is not what GE used to be, but it's still a Fortune 50, 100, I don't care, but like they're Googling for office space. This gets back to that shitty joke I made about when I ask a commercial broker how they found their house, and they say Zillow. And then the fact that they think that it's going to be any different for us is, I think, foolish, quite frankly. So anyway, everybody uses us. Our bread and butter is like 2,000 to 50,000 square feet all day. Right. So those are groups that aren't being as actively chased by the traditional players, especially at the lower end of that, and more likely to have a tech forward decision maker. Though now I'll maintain that my 75-year-old dad does everything on the internet. So everybody is on the internet now. That was maybe harder to say 10 years ago when like the iPhone just came out, but now again, everybody. So yeah, everybody is our target user. Why the big firms can't do this? A few things. It's just like not in their DNA. Is really kind of like, if I have to have like one sentence, that's how and why. It's hard to switch trajectory or course on an ocean liner. And JLL and CB and all those guys have made a ton of money doing business a certain way. And it's really hard to change that. Plus, one of the interesting things when you think about the industry, brokers don't work for brokerages, they work at brokerages, right? And if I'm a senior producer, fill in the blank firm, and they've all done this, so I won't name any by name, but they all fill in this bucket, just spent 10, 20, 30, $50 million on tech. And the CEO of fill in the blank firm walks down the hall to senior producer George and say, "Hey, George, I need you to use this app. It's going to make your client's life a lot better." George says, in words I won't use here, although I've already cursed once, "No, thank you. I'm going to go down the block." And George has made $1 trillion over the last 30 years and is not about to change how he does his business, which really puts those guys at a disadvantage there as it relates to this. And also, I think that those firms, being like really JLL, CB, Cushman, have really built themselves to be kind of, we'll call them like commercial real estate supermarkets. So they want to be all things to all people in all markets. So they can walk into an IBM and say, "Look, we have you covered. Whatever geo, whatever property type, whatever service line." And in order for them to do that, they have a really big kind of base of operations, which is really expensive to run, which means actually small, medium-sized deals don't really make sense for them to do. Yeah. So I think what you'll start seeing is those big firms just go after the big business, and like the Fortune 500 will be covered by one of those three or other people who are trying to, like, whether it's a Newmark or Colliers, who are trying to get into like kind of global business, because you need that global platform in order to do global business. And there's a ton of fixed costs associated with having that global platform. Mm-hmm. So I think you'll start seeing maybe a bifurcation in the industry of really like those global supermarkets and then everybody else.
So some of the more traditional firms that I think of that have emerged along the way, if you look at, I'll date myself a little bit, remember Edward S. Gordon, and that was like a Chicago firm. And
One of the best brokers in CB in New York are all old ESG guys.
Yeah. And I was going to go with like the old Studley that's now Savos. Like
our president used to run that, so we know a bunch about them.
So what I'm getting at is that it seems like there's been a disappearance of that local tenant rep focused sharpshooter.
Yeah.
And an opportunity. Maybe talk a little bit about what market you're in and why you think your ability to grow in those markets is maybe different than a global strategy.
Yeah. So look, we started the business in New York. We just launched, we were supposed to launch last year, a few markets. Last year happened differently than everybody in the industry thought it was going to play out. So that all kind of got pushed. We launched Houston, in LA, about 2 months ago, 3 months ago, kind of end of February for one, end of March, or sorry, beginning of March for the other. We've already closed deals in both of those markets. We're about to get to terms in what will be a fourth market. That's like a top 10 market that we'll now have a presence in. We also recently closed, we haven't announced yet, an acquisition for a flexible space platform that covers all 30 markets that matter, all 50 markets that matter. So, everywhere is the short answer. And we'll just go around the country hopscotching and planting flags, hiring brokers in those markets who know those markets well. They bring their business, we give them a bunch more business in a suite of products and services that their clients can't find anywhere else.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you this. As you look at the markets and your growth, are you doing it based on some sort of algorithm or something like that? Or is it dependent on finding the right broker who can carry the flag?
Yeah, the right broker can carry the flag. Because we turned on LA and Houston after we found the right brokers, and we've already closed deals there that we source. They also have business, but that platform has already sourced deals in both those markets. Because we can turn on the platform everywhere overnight, anywhere overnight. And even before we started planting flags and hiring brokers, we were already getting leads and business all over. We just had partner brokers, but that's not how we want to go deep. We want to go deep and kind of, I guess we'll call it, like vertically integrate a market, own the whole transaction process, start to finish, because it's a much better experience for the tenants and better experience for the broker. But we already source business all over the country. So it's just a matter of time of officially planting the flag.
So let's take a step back. So you went to Emory in Georgia, and then you ended up going to Columbia. At what point in your career, and then you were JLL, did you start to get that bug of saying, I think I could be an entrepreneur?
So look, after college, I did consulting for a couple of years, then got into real estate at JLL. When I was applying to business school, which would have been like 2009, I guess, doing the applications, my essay was, and I was involved in like a small business at the time, with a buddy of mine, and my business school essay was about getting into real estate development and kind of bringing together the business stuff, which I like small business stuff, with real estate, which I really liked. And I grew up in Houston, and downtown now looks even different than it did when I wrote this essay 11 years ago. But downtown Houston looked completely different 10 years ago than it did when I was a kid 35 years ago, going downtown with my mom on the weekends, when she had to go into work on the weekend sometimes, and you didn't want to be there after 5. It was not only was it not a 24-hour city, it was a get the fuck out of downtown before it gets dark city.
Yes.
Excuse my language. So the essay was about, wanting to go redevelop corners myself. And because I saw how awesome an effect that can have on a city. And then, I started business school and got a call from somebody who was looking for space for their last company. And they'd gone online to try and do that, thought they could, they couldn't. So we decided to try and fix that. We started SquareFoot. So there was never I thought I wanted to do my own thing at some point. I thought I was going to be real estate development. This opportunity kind of came first, and here we are. I'm having a lot of fun. Not in a rush to get into it.
So most people, when they do take this jump, they don't have any secure income coming in. Everybody in the world tells them, "Are you sure you want to do this?" How did you deal with that when you decided I'm going to start this business?
Yeah. So in some ways I was lucky. Well, a lot of ways I'm really lucky, but timing was interesting because I was in business school. So I was already not getting income. I was not planning on getting income for that 2-year period. We started the business kind of summer internship time. And by the time I graduated, there was enough there that said, let's try and do this thing. So I didn't take a salary just after I graduated, but kind of within the first 6 months or a year, I was taking a salary, not like a business school graduate salary, but enough to pay for my, I lived in a 6-bedroom apartment in New York with somebody. So my rent was reasonable for New York, at least. So yeah, I never had to make that like, holy shit, like I have a mortgage and a wife and kids. It's time to mortgage all of that.
Yeah.
The second part, which was like, do you know what you're getting yourself into? I did not. Nobody ever had that conversation with me.
Interesting. When you were looking at when you're in business school and you're looking at the challenges that are out there to start a business, what was like the number one or number two that you had to overcome yourself? Was it parents' expectations, your own expectations? I mean, you're coming out of Columbia. Got to imagine that it would have been a very high-paying analyst job or acquisitions or an asset management job. Did you have to overcome anything, or did that not even get in your mind?
My parents were always supportive. Like the conversations we had were like, let me go try this. And I didn't want to go into investment banking or consulting or any of those like traditional paths. And this was like 10 years ago. So like 3 people went to Amazon and 2 went to Google. It was like before tech was cool. And so the conversations I had both internally and like, with my parents were like, let's go try this. If it works, great. If it doesn't, I'll just go get one of those like, real estate analyst jobs, which are just in time hiring anyway. So downsides, we talk about like one-way doors, right? This wasn't a one-way door. Like nothing that I was closing no doors that I was closing were ones that I couldn't go reopen that I cared about. So the downsides from that perspective were pretty minimal. And yeah, my friends and family were supportive. And like, look, I said, I lived with 6 guys out of business school. So I didn't have my own apartment type of, like, I made it work. Right.
Now, did you start the business on your own, or did you have a partner out of the gate?
A couple of guys I knew from home at the time.
And did you raise money, or have you raised money, or have you just done it all organically?
We've gone through like 4 financing rounds now. We did like an angel round, a seed round, an A. We were thankfully raised a Series B at the end of 2019. So kind of gassed up the engines just before the car broke down. Sorry, not the car broke down. Before the
road got closed.
Highway was closed. Yeah, before the highway closed.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've raised about $25 million so far.
So how much time do you, as a leader of this business, spend on the technology side of it versus the recruiting people and running the business? Are you more focused on the tech being really good, or where do you spend your time?
I have like 3 jobs as CEO, or like 3 things I have to do as CEO, which is 1, make sure there's money in the bank. So that's, financing. 2, make sure we have the right folks on the team. So that's recruiting. And then 3, make sure everybody's in the boat rowing the same direction. So that's like the mission, strategy, execution piece. Thankfully, we have like a fantastic leadership team, right? Including like the president of Studley or Savills. I have a COO who runs product and who has a product background. So tech and product report into him, marketing reports into him. We have fantastic leaders for all of those different groups individually. It doesn't mean I can just like hit the snooze button, but it means like on a day-to-day basis, I don't need to worry about like the trains running on time, which then kind of, I don't want to say frees me up, but it lets me focus on those 3 things that I need to be doing, which is, once every 18 months financing, and then constantly recruiting, and then a bunch of time like spent managing and running a business.
So what do you think the biggest threat to your business is? Is it new technology? Is it, I guess maybe nobody going back to the office, but neither of us think that's going to be the case. What's your biggest threat as a CEO when you look at your business?
Honestly, it's all execution at this point. Like I don't lose sleep about like, is the market there? The market's there because JLL, Cushman, CB are each $1 trillion businesses. And like none of them even have significant market share. I mean, they like, I'm not talking trash, like just like it's an enormous, enormous business industry that we play in. I think we have a better service delivery, right? So I think brokers over time are going to start gravitating towards us. We weren't trying to recruit brokers, by the way, until like last year. Again, crappy timing. But the same reason why everybody can clutch their pearls talking about Compass's valuation, but Compass has a shit ton of brokers who work for them now, doing a ton of business. And that's what we'll start looking like over time. And so, yeah, it's all about like, left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. Can we go do this? Can we continue doing more business here in New York where we're just getting started? Can we continue launching new markets where we're just getting started? Can we continue building out the suite of services that we have on offer for our clients on the tenant side? And over time, we'll start doing some stuff on the landlord side. So yeah, not the thing that keeps them at night, just making sure that we keep doing what we're supposed to be doing.
So when you started the business 10 or 11 years ago, you probably had a slide deck that raised money and you probably updated it. How different is the business today from the original slide deck?
Well, the original one, we thought we were just going to do like Zillow for office space. So just the listings piece. And then we pretty quickly saw, like within first 6 months, we saw that everybody needed help with the transaction. So we said, why try and fight friction here? All right, fight whatever. Why fight anything? So then we started doing the transaction. So, but the business hasn't really changed much since then, except, going into our last financing round, Series B, we were going to roll out a pretty significant other business line with Flex by Square Foot, which was actually going to own leases. We were going to sign leases on behalf of clients who wanted lease flexibility. Thankfully, we didn't ramp that business up. I'm still very bullish both on flexible space as well as that particular way of providing it. But the markets are still in disarray right now, and everybody's trying to figure out which way is up. So I'm not in a rush to sign a bunch of leases.
Yeah. Well, having had a painful experience with a WeWork competitor as an investor, I think I'd wait a little bit, let this play itself out a little bit here. I agree with you. I think flexibility is probably the biggest issue that owners of buildings are going to have to face, and it all ties into the financing of the building. So
that's exactly.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's easier for banks and maybe debt funds to be more flexible. I don't think the CMBS market is going to be good for it, but yet most of the Class A buildings are owned via CMBS. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But there's clearly a demand to be from tenants to say, long gone are the 15-year leases and the 10-year leases, and then people want to say goodbye to the 5 and the 7-year leases. So,
and look, in the capital markets right now are the tail wagging the dog, but over time things will adjust. It just can't happen overnight because all the CMBS stuff, right? Yeah. Because you can't. Who am I supposed to go talk to? The servicer, like it's.
It costs you a few $million to go talk to them, and then you can see one can see what happens. But
and I don't think anybody, I guess for better or worse, I don't think there's going to be that much medicine that gets taken. So I think it'll be more like the next set of buildings that start getting bought, not this year, but like once we start figuring out what the new normal looks like, we'll just get financed slightly differently. Not using debt, obviously, but everybody's going to go in knowing that our rent roll is going to be, X% of it is going to be long-term leases to like law firms who still will want 10-year deals. And then Y% is going to be to 3 to 5 year. And then the balance is going to be some sort of flexible stuff. And you'll put different underwriting assumptions for each of those. By the way, as you go from 10 years to 10 days, your per square foot rent goes up, but your lease term goes down. So it starts looking like the 10-day lease looks like a hotel. But by the way, there's 1 trillion hotels that have gotten financed. Like there's an answer for all of this. It just hasn't had to get solved yet.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you're going to see a lot of property management firms, and exactly what you said. I think we're going to have every building we own will have a floor or two that'll be more flexible, and it'll go up the building for longer term. Let's move back over into talking about company culture. I think it's really important. I know my audience really enjoys hearing how an entrepreneur started their business, and like what technology decisions did you make from the beginning? Did you just say, look, Microsoft's the dominant operating platform, so we're going to build everything off of that? Did you go with Google? And how does that tie whatever you do use to your company culture and how you interact digitally with your employees and team?
I mean, I think we've used like Google Suite from the start. I'm trying to think what else is interesting to talk. Like, we're a tech company that we build tech for our clients. Like, I don't spend much time thinking about what our internal productivity stack looks like. So we still use a lot of like Microsoft products because everybody sends us a lease in Word, but internally we collaborate using Google Sheets actually. From a culture perspective, right? Like everything we were doing was already in the cloud, right? We use Google Docs, we use email, we use Slack, which was nice actually when everybody started working from home, because we weren't like, holy crap, like how do we operate? We already had that kind of the nuts and bolts infrastructure there. By the way, not for nothing, like we've had a team in Belfast for like 4 years now. So we've already been like from an all hands perspective, there were already people calling in from another office. By the way, they were in an office. So remote doesn't equal sitting on the couch, which is a misnomer, but whatever. So yeah.
Are the people in Ireland, are they programmers or coders, or are they brokers?
Programmers. Yeah, programmers. We've also over time had some marketing people out there too. We don't currently.
Yeah. Well, that's the biggest risk, I think, that for most employees who think that the leverage has changed. I think most employers are going to go, wow, if you can work from home in New York or Los Angeles, I bet you I could find someone to work from home from India or Belfast or at least Boise. And I think that, that's going to be a real issue.
It's yes, I think, another provocative statement. I think you have a bunch of people who are yelling from the rooftops how awesome work from home is. And what that actually just means is that an employer is going to be able to find somebody who works twice as hard for half as much working from their couch.
Yeah. Well, the other point out to what I think it's interesting, because we both tend to agree on this. What I find interesting is everybody is looking at maybe March of last year, or when the second and third shutdowns happened in November or whatever, and saying, oh, it's great. We had 12 Zoom meetings today. And well, it was one thing when we're all told, and our kids and everybody was told to shut down and you could have 10 Zoom meetings. But we've been coming back to the office for a while, because I like to. It's kind of important to what we do, but I like it. And I can't have Zoom calls all day because I'm having meetings and lunches and breakfasts. And so we're not going to all adapt to those people who want to stay at home. And I just don't know how it works. One of my frustrations is why did Zoom kill every conference call? There was a reason why you had conference calls. You didn't have to be on a video. And, and I think there's a lot of pushback to that. So I think the office business in the long term, once we get through this, but I mean, you're a great example of one of my points, which is we're seeing the boomers have, the one thing the pandemic did is it forced retirement for a lot of boomers, and Gen X and millennials are taking over, and they're going to run the companies the way they, for 20 years or 10 years, thought the boomers were screwing it up. And part of that is going to be digital, but I don't think anybody is going to say, hey, just stay at home and my business will be fine no matter what the business is.
Although the interesting thing, because you hit a nerve there, I agree. The only businesses that haven't really handed over the reins to the next generation yet are commercial real estate brokerages.
Well, you look at C&W, Andrew McDonald's only, late mid-40s. So you're starting to see it. He's the chairman of the American, but it's slow. It's slow. I agree. And it's going to be interesting. Now, I want to go right back into the technology, because it seems to me that whether it's C&W, CB, Colliers, JLL, they do have pockets of money, and they've been given money to the fifth walls of the world and doing things like that, trying to figure out how technology will enhance their business. But you don't yet view, or do you view one of those major firms saying, hey, we view SquareFoot as some competition we don't like and we need to be like them? You don't see that threat as something that's jumping out at you?
No, is the short answer. I mean, look, when I think about like our differentiators, right? So one, it starts with like how we acquire a lot of our business, right? Which is squarefoot.com, where when you Google in a market that we're in, you Google downtown office space, you find us. That's something that is not easily turned on overnight. That's a bunch of years of not blood, sweat, and tears, but whatever it takes to make Google happy. That's one. Two, it just gets back to like the example I always use, right, is like Kodak had a digital camera on their shelf. And Kodak is no longer in business, right? Because they're like, nobody's going to use this. Actually, even if they thought everybody was going to use it, it's never a sure thing until you look in the rearview mirror and say, duh, right?
Yeah.
And you have companies, and here you don't really have companies, right? You have consortiums of individual producers who are used to doing things a certain way and getting them to adopt something. These firms have all tried. I mean, I love my boss from JLL, but like, this is old, but when they were trying to get us to use CRMs, he would still have our admin print out on 4 11x17 pieces of paper all of his clients.
Yeah.
And that actually hasn't changed. And by the way, this was a guy who at the time, not to date myself, whatever that means, as a 38-year-old, like the iPhone had just come out. And my boss was running around the office calling himself Mr. Technology because he had his new iPhone and was so happy he had his new iPhone. And again, that's in his personal life, right? I have an iPhone. Look how cool I am. I'm so forward thinking. And they're like, and here's this thing that will make you 10 times more productive at work. He's like, fuck that. I'm using the printer.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I think a lot of that mentality is the pandemic did a lot to push them off, but they're still making decisions. I get that. So one of the things I do want to talk, because you haven't been bashful about making some acquisitions, which is a tough thing to do when you're a small company. Can you talk a little bit about your thinking about acquiring companies? And I know you're on your second one now since you started the business, and it could be more. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Well, I like to think that we think as if we're a big business already, right? Or whatever size business, right? Which is any given point you can buy, build, or partner.
Yeah.
And there's sometimes when each of those makes sense. And we all can also be opportunistic about it. So when we bought Pivot Desk, that was a very opportunistic deal, right? Like Pivot Desk, unfortunately, kind of went the way of the dodo. Industrious bought them. Industrious wasn't using them. I called Jamie. I said, Jamie, can I have Pivot Desk? He said, you can't have it, but I'll sell it to you. So that's how we got Pivot Desk. With this flexible space platform that we just closed on kind of a week and a half ago that we'll announce later this month. It's actually similar story to the story I was just telling about JLL and CB, and that you were telling about CB, right? Except what we're building here is the commercial real estate services firm of the next generation, not the commercial real estate services firm of the last generation. So every morning when we wake up, we say, what does the tenant of the future need? And by the way, when you're solving tenants' needs, you're also solving landlords' needs, because those are just the clients, right? Customers, which is a very new way of thinking about the business, which is not unique to us, but that's not how people thought about the business 30 years ago. So we say, great, flexible space is a bigger part of it. We leaned in it with Pivot Desk. We started leaning with Pivot Desk. We mentioned Flex by Square Foot, which is now on the shelf temporarily. And then with this new thing. And then there's other things that like don't exist, like our tour book platform that didn't, like, there's no like off the shelf tour book platform, so that we built that. And now as we look to go into new markets, same buy, build, partner, right? I told you we've done deals in most of the top 30 markets. Most of that has been on a partnership basis before. As we go into some new markets, we're building, right? Hiring somebody, 3 somebodies, 5 somebodies in that new market that we're not there yet, but hopefully we're going to be buying a brokerage. And that's how we'll go into that market. But I like to think that we're pretty, no pun intended, but like flexible, right? We're not dogmatic about many things, and kind of go with the flow. And when opportunities present themselves, we like to be ready to take them.
So how do you look at the last 10 or 11 years as your journey? What's changed in your personal life around being a CEO and being an entrepreneur? And what do you think the challenges are going to be over the next few years as an entrepreneur?
You know, I think I finally know, well, two things. One, I think I finally know a little bit about what I'm doing. So I'm less feeling my way around in the dark. And then two, more crucially, I know what I've gotten myself into.
Yeah.
Right. I was joking around with a buddy yesterday. If somebody was like, "Oh, do you want to go do this? By the way, it's gonna be the next 10 years of your life." First off, nobody ever said that to me, and I don't know what I would have said. Now it has been the last 10 years of my life. And in both an exciting and sobering sentence, we're just getting started. I could be so lucky for this to be the next 10 years of my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at some of the biggest companies out there that started very entrepreneurially, from Microsoft and Apple and all. The first 10 years, yes, people, Steve Jobs started in the garage and all that, but it took 10 years for those businesses to start to get their legs and then explode. Very few. Now, obviously, there's some in Slack and a few others we can point to that exploded right away, but that's the exception, not the rule. So,
yeah. But they slowly, then suddenly.
Yeah. Has the pandemic got you to rethink some of your lifestyle choices or anything like that? I mean, I know for me, it certainly has. And I'm hearing it more and more that it's at least put a lens on some changes people want to make in their lives.
It's interesting. So three things happened kind of March to May of last year. The pandemic started, went into lockdown. We moved to the suburbs and we had our first kid.
Wow. That's some life changes.
Yeah. So any one of those three, my wife will point out, would have been like a big adjustment. And all three of them happened at the same time. And I actually have no idea how to tease out how much of my lifestyle, which today looks very different from had we been talking February of last year, to now as a result of any of those things, right?
Yeah.
Last February, I didn't have an 11-month-old that I like seeing before he goes to bed, right? Which means when I do go to the city, and I love going to the city because working in an office with the people you work with is irreplaceable. I take an early train home because I make sure I do my meetings when I'm there, either internal or external. And I take the 436. So I'm here to play with him for an hour before he goes to bed. And then the beauty about the internet, I can just open up my laptop and work for 2 more hours after that.
Yes. Yeah.
So
I think that's a lot of people have come to that. I know, I'm coaching my 11-year-old Little League, which I swore I would never do, but because of the pandemic, I was like, well, this will be the last opportunity. And it's been a lot of fun.
And I think there's been this false dichotomy that people were like the remoters, I guess I'll call them, like say, okay, like if you go to an office, you can't ever hug your child.
Yeah.
That's not true. I mean, if you work in the office 7 to 7, you can't. But by the way, the same thing that enables remote means that I can work, like I'll get off the phone and I'll go play with my kid for a few minutes before he goes to bed. And then I'll go do work for another hour if I need to.
Yeah.
So like the blending of work and life has changed.
Yes, I agree. And I think that the thing that we're going to see as a society is people like yourself who are younger CEOs are going to continue to put strain and push on those boomer things about what was successful. It's no longer about turning the light on at 7 in the morning and leaving at 7 o'clock at night. It's what you're doing throughout a day, and really what you produce is what's going to matter, especially in the brokerage world, right? It's not going to change. You either get deals done and make money or you don't. And you're just trying to give everybody the tools to do it most effectively.
And by the way, I don't think the number of hours have changed. And I don't think FaceTime has changed, going back to everything we just talked about earlier. What has changed is the ability to structure your day in a different way.
Yeah, I agree.
Because when my mom was working, like my mom was a banker, which like kind of similar, right? Not similar at all, but like she worked in an office. And 25 years ago, I mean, maybe she had email, but like when she plugged in on from home, she had like a little card, and she had to like enter a 9-digit code to try and like VPN in over a 28.8 modem. Like that's very different from you and I are having like a full video conference right now.
Yeah. By the way, 25 years ago, I started as a young lawyer at Pillsbury, and we did not have email.
Yeah.
It started to come from the mid to late 90s, I mean.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Look, when I was 13, I had like an AOL account. It wasn't being used for 25 years ago. I was 13. So
yeah,
I had an AOL account. Nobody was using it for business yet.
That's right.
Yeah.
I remember when I got my iPhone, waited in line in 2007, I was like, this isn't going to work until it combines my BlackBerry and my personal. And
that's what Mr. Technology was like. They won't let me get my work emails on this. I was running around the office yelling about it.
Yeah. Well, this has been a great conversation, John. I'm really excited. I was a broker for several years, and I was at Cushman Realty and then Cushman and Wakefield, and left that. And I constantly am watching to see what the brokerage firms are doing. I thought BTS has really evolved into bringing technology to brokers in a way that didn't exist before. But I also think now getting clients outside of the big facilities, getting clients and being the tip of that spear is really going to be important. So I have to end this with one question. Of all the real estate names out there, I have to say SquareFoot.com is one of the great ones. How did you get the URL? How did that happen? Because that's a big part of your branding.
Yeah. So when we were first starting the company, we were trying to come up with a list of names. We came up with a list of like potential names, like everything from like Space Monkey, which wasn't going to be it, but like a whole bunch of random stuff. And then we started looking at like real estate specific words. SquareFoot was taken, but the SquareFoot wasn't. So we started as the SquareFoot. And it cost us, I don't know, like $250, like nothing.
Yeah.
We used that for a while, and then SquareFoot either became available or we tried to make it available. And then for a not unreasonable price, we said, can we have that? And then we paid it off over like 2 years, and now it's ours.
It's a great thing. I still have somebody in China who's sending me emails saying if I want to buy rising.com. We're just talking about you getting squarefoot.com, but I know that you've had a great interest in prop tech, and I mentioned briefly Fifth Wall, but you're really a leader for a younger CEO in making some seed investments here and there. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing in prop tech?
Yeah. So we've gotten kind of addicted to it. So look, going back a handful, we've been doing prop tech at SquareFoot since before prop tech was a word. So going back a handful of years, always used to get folks reaching out, or like friends of friends saying, hey, I'm starting this thing. I'd love to talk to you about it. And I started writing like really small personal checks when I thought something was interesting. Did that a handful of times, was having fun, learning a lot. Middle of 2018, somebody told me about Angel List, and they have this whole like syndicate platform thing. Started participating in random deals, writing even smaller personal checks. Random, not that I didn't look at the company, but I didn't know the CEO kind of personally. And then by the end of the year, I said, wait a minute, the deals that I'm participating in don't look really different from the deals I'm doing myself direct when I start a syndicate. So I started a syndicate kind of the back half of 18. We've now done like 60 or 70 deals through that. We've become one of the more active syndicates on the platform. We do probably like 2/3 prop tech, 1/3 other stuff. And then actually last summer, so almost a year ago now, AngelList started a fund product. So now I have a fund too that only invests in prop tech.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And the fund, the syndicate's open to anybody. We'll take new LPs for the fund too, but the fund, a lot of the LPs are real estate and prop tech execs, which first off is a lot of fun for us. And secondly, is like our superpower, right? It helps with sourcing, it helps with diligence, and then it helps with value add to the companies after we invest. And yeah, just through the fund we're a very high volume fund. We write relatively small checks, but into a ton of companies. We'll do 40 deals this quarter out of the fund.
With that, have you had any exits of note that you can talk about?
No. Well, one, we got our money back. That was like a quick one that sold to like a more mature space. No exits, a lot of great markups, but as I tell my wife, we can't eat IRR. Hopefully we can eat the result of IRR in a couple of years. Knock on wood, the portfolio is doing great. But yeah, no exits to name. I've only been doing it for 3 years really. So you don't really want exits yet.
Have you seen any technology that you invested because you thought it would be a good fit for SquareFoot?
Very little, for actually 2 reasons. I try not to invest in things that could wind up in our sphere. And then 2, I don't think broker tools are a business worth investing in, right? I don't think, getting back to everything, that I believe very, very strongly that you need a full stack solution there. So yeah, don't really mess with any of that.
That's terrific. Well, this has been a great conversation. We went through how you evolved as a CEO and as a person and as a husband and as a father. Got to ask you, as we're sitting here at the end of the pandemic, what do you think the next 12 to 18 months are going to mean for your business, and where do you see it growing?
Look, we see every week. So I'll speak anecdotally real quick. Every week when I get on the train to go into the city, it's more crowded than the week before, and like noticeably different, right? Slowly then suddenly. Like there's now, a lot of people on the trains, and that's more people going back to the office, right? And this is before, like, you're now starting to see like the all calls back, like Goldman said, like, I don't know, June 14th, like, hope you don't like the couch too much. Because I think people want to be in the office, by the way.
I do too.
Even if they're not being forced to. However, I also believe that there's a lot of people who were correctly scared and didn't want to get COVID, so they stayed home, right? But as soon as they were vaccinated, got their second shot, waited 14 days or 21 days, depending on what shot you get, I'm back in the office, because that's what you want to do.
I agree.
So anyway, we're seeing demand pick back up a lot in New York. Like I mentioned, we've already closed deals in our expansion markets. We'll start next 12 months. New York will be back for us. And I don't know, a year from now, we'll probably be in 6 or 7 markets, like full, and continue building new products. I mean, like I said, and also the interesting thing, you said this earlier, which I agree with, like the time of a 15-year lease is gone, right? Which actually makes real estate a lot more complicated than it used to be. Because the choice then 5 years ago is like, okay, you're going to sign a 5-year lease or 10-year lease.
Yeah.
And you have one location.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe you're like a regional company, so you have multiple offices, but like you have one HQ. Now you have one HQ. You also are going to start hiring remotely, but I believe if you're hiring the right people remotely, they want offices. So how do you solve? I now have 4 people in Chicago, or 3 people in Minneapolis, or 17 people in this other city. How do you solve that? That set of real estate solutions just got a whole lot more complicated. By the way, in some of those locations, you want long-term. Some of them you want short-term. Some you want dedicated space. Some you want shared space. There's a whole lot more variables that just go into that equation to solve real estate.
Yes.
When that happens, you need a trusted advisor even more so than yesterday.
Yeah.
And that's where we come into play.
I think you've got a great view on it. And I think the complexity of how people run a national company is, we haven't even gotten into it yet. You guys are very well positioned to deal with it. So, Jonathan, I really enjoyed having you on the podcast, The Real Market. It's been a great conversation, and looking forward to watching you and your success.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris.
All right, buddy. Thank you.
And please don't forget to follow us. We'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to the podcast. You can do that on Apple iTunes or any of the other podcasting services. It's The Real Market with Chris Rising. And follow us on Twitter at Chris Rising or at RisingRP. And please follow our blog, chrisrising.com or risingrp.com. Thanks so much.
This episode of The Real Market is brought to you by Rising Investor Platform. The platform provides accredited investors with exclusive real estate investment opportunities on a deal-by-deal basis across various asset classes, including office, industrial, hospitality, multifamily, and data. The platform also provides an inside look at deals in our pipeline while giving investors the chance to indicate interest before it's too late. We recently funded our acquisition of 9320 Telstar, a mixed-use office industrial property in El Monte, California, using our investor platform. To learn more about how accredited investors can join the Rising Investor Platform, please visit risinginvestorplatform.com.